Hello, people. I finished a book. It's the second one in the Bounty trilogy, and it's also the shortest one. This one is called Men Against the Sea, and it's only 137 pages. Also by Nordhoff and Hall, and they waited a year or so before they finished this one. This one was published in 1934. Just a real quick, funny story. I think it's funny anyway. Before I came out here to make this video, this is early in the morning here in Florida, so it's not freezing or anything, but it's a little bit chilly. But since I make some of my videos with my shirt off, I decided I'm going to take my shirt off today. And it made me think of something back when we were little kids. Not little kids, we were young men, 15, 16, 14. There was a guy that lived on Ash Street in Dearborn, Michigan. And for some reason we had picked out his house to throw rocks at and apples and what have you, snowballs. And every time the guy came to the door to yell at us, and he used to actually get into his car and chase us, which I think made it more fun since he chased us. Every time he came out, he didn't have a shirt on. So we started to call him Tarzan. And I think that's why we called him Tarzan, because he never wore a shirt. Just a quick story. I don't know what made me think of that, but something did. This is real short. It's 137 pages, so I had this finished yesterday. And I just have a little bit of reading here. This is about after they put Bligh and some of the men into the launch, and they send him on his way. And Bligh makes this, incredible open voyage, which is a true thing. He really did do it. He ends up at Timor, which is a Dutch settlement. At that time, the Dutch are still making money hand over fist. They have a huge navy, a navy that at times rivals England. But they make it to Timor. They go from there to Batavia, and they get a ship, and they go back to England. And Bligh ends up with quite a career after that. Oddly enough, Bligh is put on land, and he's some type of a governor in Australia, when Australia is still like a drop-off point for criminals from England. And Bligh suffers his second mutiny there, and he gets thrown into jail and held there in jail until everybody can sort out what they're going to do with him. Fifth paragraph, page 360. And this book does not start over again at page 1 for the separate books. It just keeps going. Fifth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're in the boat, and there is a rainstorm approaching. They have decent weather while they're in this boat. Most days they're making 100 miles a day. But they get, a lot of rain, a lot of high waves, and they're bailing a lot. And towards the end, when they're starving to death, the bailing becomes quite the ordeal. It came on in what appeared to be a solid wall of blackness, faintly lighted by a dull grayish glow from the sky before it. There was no wind immediately behind. The slowness of its approach assured us of that. Therefore we waited in silence, while the sound increased and spread, now deadening as we fell into the trough, more loud as we rose to the crest of the next wave. Then, as though at the last moment it had leaped to make sure of us, we were in the midst of it, drenched, half drowned, gasping for breath, in a deluge such as we had never before experienced. And I have another dull story to tell in regards to that. In fact, that's why I marked that paragraph. But one time, me and the kids were up north, up by the cabin. The cabin had not been built yet, and we were out fishing. And all three of us were in my rowboat, which I don't use anymore. And we were fishing on Little Tomahawk Lake, and it was just a real light rain, not even hardly enough to get us wet. It's like that all day long. At one point during the day, we could hear a noise, and I was looking around going, what in the fuck is that? And when we got back to the property, like I said earlier, the cabin was not built yet. We were sleeping in a tent. And there was no puddles of water around or nothing, but it had rained so heavy where the tent was. I had a tarp down on the ground, flat on the ground, and that's what I set the tent up on. And the rain, while we were gone, must have been flooding, and it went over that tarp. And so the tarp was covered with water, and the tent was flat upon that. And when we got in there at night, it was like a waterbed, like you could feel it swooshing around. And we decided to try and sleep anyway, and of course it soaked through the bottom of the tent. Our sleeping bags got all wet, and we had to sleep in the truck that night. But that's the only time I can think of in my life that I heard it raining. This is like 3 miles away. It was raining so hard that we could hear that. Very boring story, I know. Not much happens. This is just a log of their daily starving, their daily being thirsty, whether they catch a bird or not, whether they catch a fish or not. They do get lucky and they make it to a couple of small islands where they can find shellfish. And early on in the trip, really only a couple of days after the mutiny, they stop at an island, and it's full of natives. They show the natives. Bly has a magnifying glass, and he's able to kindle fires with that. The natives want that magnifying glass really bad, and it begins to get worse and worse. There's 18 of the men with Bly, but there ends up being like 100 natives. It becomes clear to them that the natives are going to kill them. The natives stand around knocking rocks together. That had to have been terrifying. And at one point, Bly stands up and he says, "Come on, men, we got to go." And they push their way through the natives and they get into the boat. And before the natives really know what's going on, they're in the boat. But one guy, Norton, goes back to get the anchor that's on shore, and he gets killed by the natives. They beat his brains out with rocks. And the anchor is not, they don't call it an anchor, they call it a grapnel. And there's one other grapnel in the water holding the boat still. And when they go to pull the thing up, it's stuck. And so the natives are bombarding them with rocks. And a couple of them get hit in the head. The rocks are actually landing in the boat. They're able to throw them back at the natives. That's probably the most exciting thing out of the whole story of Men Against the Sea. So I'm reading the last one. The last one is called Pitcairn's Island. And thanks for watching.